Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi. Today, I'm speaking to someone who didn't escape. You awakened. You didn't collapse. You simply reached the point where standing became more natural than crawling. For the first time in what felt like 1,000 years, your soul said, enough. And maybe nobody else saw it. Maybe nobody else clapped. But the heavens paused when you got up. You didn't rise for the world. You rose because your Lord whispered something into your bones that made surrender feel wrong. And deep down, even in the quiet of your nights, you know it. Something inside of you finally came back to life. For the longest time, you thought you were just surviving. You mistook your silence for weakness. You thought your stillness was defeat. But now you understand. There was a storm being calmed inside of you, not a battle being lost. There are souls who run when it gets hard. But you rose. And that's a different kind of strength. You didn't need the crowd. You didn't need proof. You didn't even need clarity. You only needed to feel that your heart was beating again with something sacred. That was enough. You didn't rise because you had all the answers. You rose because you stopped believing the lies. You stopped agreeing with the shame that tried to keep you buried. You stopped apologizing for feeling things deeply. You stopped asking for permission to breathe. And the moment you stood up, even with trembling legs, the story shifted. The atmosphere changed. The tests didn't disappear. But now they fear the one who's been resurrected. There's something undeniable about you now. You carry a different presence. You walk into spaces and something follows you that the eye can't explain. It's not pride. It's not arrogance. It's the quiet weight of someone who knows what it cost to get back up. The world might still call you broken, but your soul knows. You were chosen. Not because you were perfect, but because even in your imperfection, you refused to stay asleep. Let me say this clearly. What happened to you wasn't random. Your pain wasn't wasted. Your silence wasn't empty. The dark nights, the loneliness, the long days of invisible effort, they weren't just part of your story. They were the fire that refined your faith. And that fire did not consume you. It revealed you. Now you walk different. Now your prayers carry power. Now your tongue speaks from experience, not theory. You are not who you were. And you're not even who you were last month. Something changed. Something divine entered your routine. You no longer wake up to survive the day. You wake up because there's something inside you pulling you forward. A mission, a purpose. A quiet whisper from above telling you, keep walking, I'm with you. And that voice, even when it's not loud, is louder than any doubt. This rise wasn't announced. It wasn't planned. But it was ordained. It came exactly when it was supposed to. And now that it has begun, it won't stop. Because you're not rising on your own. You are being carried by something greater, steadied by hands unseen, supported by a promise that doesn't break. You're not walking toward the light. The light is already inside you. And every step you take now is just revealing more of what has always been there. And I want you to stay with me until the end of this video, because by the time we reach the conclusion, I will pray for you. Not just any prayer, but one that seals this rising, one that protects the light that was just reborn, one that calms your heart for what's coming next, because what's ahead of you is even more sacred than what's behind. Not every rise looks like a celebration. Sometimes it looks like closing your eyes in frustration, but still saying, I'll try again. Sometimes it looks like deleting the message you were about to send, walking away from what once controlled you, or choosing silence over drama. These are the signs no one claps for. No one applauds the person who opens the prayer mat in the middle of tears. No one notices the internal earthquakes, but they're real, and they matter. In fact, those unseen victories are what prove you've risen more than anything else. There's something sacred about the steps you've taken in private. The ones that felt like crawling through the desert with no map, no crowd, no music. And yet, you kept going. You didn't rise on a stage. You rose in your living room. You rose in the car. You rose at 2 a.m. when your chest felt too tight to breathe, and you still whispered guidance into the dark. That's not weakness. That's proof that you were chosen to rise, even when the world didn't send you an invitation. You may not even realize how powerful your movements have become. You've been shedding old habits, not by force but by clarity. Things that once entertained you now disturb you. The people who once surrounded you now confuse you. The conversations you used to enjoy now feel empty. That's not you becoming distant, you becoming. You stopped looking for applause. You stopped needing people to tell you, "I'm proud of you," because you finally realized, if you keep waiting for others to recognize your growth, you'll stay in the same place forever. But the real ones, the ones who are spiritually awake, don't rise for claps. They rise because they're being pulled by something unseen, a truth deeper than opinion, a calling that doesn't require validation. You are one of those people now. You've crossed over. Even your distractions feel different now. The things that used to entertain you now feel like they're stealing from your peace. That's a sign, a powerful one. Because when the heart becomes sensitive to the wrong things, it's preparing to receive the right ones. You can't fake that kind of shift. It's the type of inner change that confirms something serious has begun. And you didn't force it. It came like a whisper, then a wind, then a transformation. You're learning how to be okay with your own company. And that's terrifying for people who rely on noise to feel alive. But you've tasted something sweeter. You felt the stillness that comes from knowing your Lord is watching you when no one else is. You felt the comfort of not having to explain your growth to anyone. You felt the joy of surrendering what no longer aligns with who you're becoming. That's rare. That's sacred. That's the proof of your rising. And now, you're starting to protect your energy. You don't reply to everything. You don't show up for chaos. You don't offer your peace cheaply. You've become selective. Not because you think you're better, but because you've finally seen how costly it is to let the wrong energy enter your space. You no longer carry everyone's burdens. You carry your purpose. And that's heavy enough. But it's also holy. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your rise. Growth is not a group project. Healing is not a conference call. And elevation? That happens when no one's looking. The greatest victories come when you're face to face with the thoughts that used to defeat you, and you choose differently, over and over again. And no, it doesn't always feel powerful. But it is. Because every time you say no to who you used to be, you're saying yes to who you're becoming. Your soul is no longer entertained by distractions that blur your vision. You crave clarity now, depth, purpose, real connection with the one who gave you this second chance. And that craving, that internal hunger, it means you've risen. Don't wait for someone to notice it. Celebrate it internally. Honor it silently. Because even if no one else can see it, the one who matters most sees everything. He always has. 1,000 years. That's what it felt like, didn't it? Not because time actually passed that way, but because your soul was buried so deep that even days started to feel like centuries. You weren't just tired. You were carrying seasons inside your chest that never got closure. You were holding pieces of yourself you didn't know how to name. And for the longest time, you mistook that weight for weakness. But now you see it. That heaviness wasn't the end of your story. It was the beginning of your rising. When people say, "You've changed," they don't know what it took. They weren't there when you stayed up, wondering if anything would ever feel real again. They weren't there when you questioned your worth, your future, your existence. You looked at your reflection and didn't recognize it. The mirror didn't lie. It just hadn't seen the version of you that was still underground. But now that version is rising. Now the mirror shows eyes that survived something sacred. Not perfect, not untouched, but alive. Finally alive. Your 1,000 years weren't about distance. They were about depth. Every wound carved out space inside of you for understanding. Every silence stretched your capacity for patience. Every betrayal taught you where to never place your hope again. You weren't wasting time. You were being taught in ways the world doesn't recognize. The lessons weren't in books. They were in brokenness. And only the chosen ones get taught that way. Some people learn by watching. You had to learn by breaking. Some people find purpose in comfort. You found it in chaos. That's why your rise is different. That's why your strength confuses those who once thought they knew you. You were never just the quiet one, the broken one, the lost one. You were the hidden one, buried but not dead, paused but not forgotten. And the difference is everything. Because hidden things are often being prepared for something public, not for show, but for purpose. You see, when you've lived spiritually dry for that long, even a drop of light feels like a flood. And lately, the light is not just dripping in, it's pouring. Slowly, consistently, healing you in places you didn't think could feel whole again. You're not just smiling now. You're breathing without apology. You're not just functioning, you're becoming. And that becoming didn't come from luck. It came from endurance, from sacred struggle, from the decision to not let pain be the final chapter. You've begun to separate who you are from what you went through. That's a sacred shift. You've realized you're not your trauma. You're not your triggers. You're not your failures. You're what survived them. And now, every time you move forward, every time you forgive, every time you try again, you're declaring that you're not who the darkness said you were. You're someone new. Not fake new, but refined new, grown new, clear new. The 1,000-year feeling? It's because the version of you that's rising now had to wait. Wait until your ego softened. Wait until your pride surrendered. Wait until your intentions were pure enough to carry the next phase of your life. It wasn't punishment, it was preparation. The doors that were shut weren't a rejection. They were divine protection, keeping you from building your future with hands still holding old pain. And now those same hands are ready, open, empty, ready to receive. And here's the beautiful truth. Even if it took 1,000 years, it's still on time. Because divine timing isn't about what's fast, it's about what's right. And right now, something in your soul is aligning with that. You feel it. The clarity, the peace, the pull. And no one around you needs to understand it. Because some things are not meant to be explained. They're meant to be lived. And you, chosen one, are finally living. So ask yourself this. If your soul has finally risen, what are you willing to let go of so it can keep rising? What habits? What relationships? What distractions are you ready to release now that you know what it feels like to breathe again? Because this rising isn't a one-time event. It's a commitment. A daily agreement between you and the unseen. That you will not go back to the version of yourself that begged to be understood by people who weren't meant to see you. This isn't about revenge. It's not about proving anything. It's about peace. You've waited long enough. You've cried hard enough. You've healed in silence. Now, let your new season begin. You didn't rise with noise. You didn't rise with grand announcements or fireworks. You didn't even rise with witnesses. But you rose. Quietly. Without anyone needing to notice. And that kind of rise is the most dangerous to the darkness. Because it cannot be tracked and it cannot be stopped. When someone rises silently, it means the shift happened within. The roots went deeper. The foundation got stronger. And now, no wind can shake what was built in secret. People often expect transformation to look dramatic. They think you need to speak louder, act differently, show off your new life. But your elevation didn't come with volume. It came with clarity. You didn't need to scream it. You became it. Your healing is not loud. It's not seeking validation. It's just real. And that's what makes it powerful. Because when you truly rise, you don't even feel the need to explain anymore. You let your peace speak. You let your boundaries speak. You let your silence speak. There's something beautiful about walking into a room and not needing to shrink anymore. Not because you want to dominate, but because you no longer apologize for existing. You carry yourself differently now. There's a quiet confidence that wasn't there before. It's not pride. It's awareness. You're aware of your worth. Aware of your limits. Aware of the cost of peace. And you're not willing to trade it for noise anymore. That alone confirms your rise. You see, when the rising is real, it doesn't make you louder. It makes you wiser. You don't speak to impress. You speak to impact. You don't argue to win. You speak only when it adds value. You don't chase attention. You protect your presence. You've learned that not every conversation deserves your energy. Not every invitation deserves a yes. And not every person deserves access. That awareness didn't come from pride. It came from pain. And now it's become your protection. You didn't post about it. You didn't announce it. You just started showing up differently. You started honoring your mornings. You started choosing stillness. You started answering pain with prayer. You started walking away from what doesn't align. And no one had to tell you to do that. You just knew. You felt it. Something shifted. And from that day, you couldn't go back. Not because someone told you to change, but because your spirit demanded more. And the beautiful part is, the world still sees you as the same person. They don't realize they're speaking to someone who's been reborn. But that's okay. You're not here to prove anything. You're here to live with intention, to move with purpose, to grow without explanation. And when you live like that, everything else starts to align around you. You stop chasing and start attracting, not by manipulation, but by being whole. There's power in the moments when no one notices your battles, but you keep going anyway. There's strength in the decisions no one praises, but you make them because you know they align with your values. That kind of consistency builds a life that doesn't fall apart when storms come. Because the storm isn't new, and neither is your resilience. What's new is your clarity. What's new is the fact that you no longer abandon yourself just to be accepted. You're walking differently now. Not because life is easier, but because you are steadier. You're no longer moved by temporary emotions. You've tasted what stability feels like, and now you protect it like treasure. You no longer chase chaos to feel alive. You've realized that peace doesn't have to be boring. It can be fulfilling. It can be sacred. It can be loud in its own quiet way. Maybe you didn't notice it, but while others counted you out, something holy was taking root within you. Not the kind of growth you post about, not the kind of strength that screams for attention. No. This was the silent kind, the rare kind, the kind that builds endurance in silence and gives birth to clarity without applause. This is what happens when someone doesn't run, but stands, even if trembling, through what was meant to break them. The reason your soul feels heavier these days isn't because you're lost. It's because you're becoming. Yes, becoming. Becoming someone this world doesn't know how to describe. You're walking through experiences that have no name, only purpose. And even though you still feel weak at times, there's a power resting on you that didn't come from this world. A sacred weight. A calling that rewrote your timeline. You didn't just rise. You were summoned. You weren't just preserved. You were being assigned. It's why some doors remained locked until you no longer needed them. It's why some connections ended the moment your spirit matured enough to know they were distractions in disguise. And now, you see how your silence was protection. You see how the unanswered prayers weren't neglect. They were divine redirections. You see how the delay didn't deny you. It defined you. You're no longer chasing what people value, because your soul is after something richer. Divine nearness, divine weight, divine trust. And yes, you've made mistakes, but those very failures are what made you fall in love with humility. They made you fall in love with hiddenness. They made you stop chasing proof and start honoring your process. Let them wonder where you went. Let them be confused about how you came back so focused, so softened, so grounded. Because what happened in you wasn't a comeback. It was a transformation. And not the type you can brag about online. This one happened in the secret chambers of your soul. The transformation where Allah peeled away your pride layer by layer until all that was left was surrender. The transformation where you wept over things you used to fight for. The transformation that taught you how to stand without seeking revenge. That's real power. That's the rise no one sees coming. So tonight, as you sit with your own thoughts, know this. You're not behind. You're not forgotten. You're not being punished. You're being prepared. The kind of rise you're living through isn't loud because its roots are eternal. The people around you may never understand the weight you carry, but the one who assigned it to you does. So breathe. You haven't missed your moment. In fact, you're standing in it right now. The difference is, this time, you know who you are. And more importantly, you know whose you are. And now, as promised, let us pray together. O Allah, owner of mercy and giver of strength, I call upon you for the one listening right now. Reward them for every moment they chose to rise when they could have run. Pour peace into their heart and clarity into their path. Replace every loss with something better. Let this season be the beginning of what no eye has seen and no mind has imagined. Remove the burdens they've carried alone and give them signs tonight that you are near. Let their rise be quiet, but let its impact echo through generations. Amin.